Hi, I'm Niki, the Obsessive Bookseller. Welcome to episode 5 of our Genre Deep Dive Challenge. This is a challenge I'm running with my patrons. Once a quarter, we are picking a topic that we are really excited to focus on and making a concerted effort to choose titles from that topic. My selection for this quarter was science fiction, like all the titles that I am super excited to get to, making them more of a priority. At the end of the last video, I did a random draw from a bucket, and the title that won, Behind the Throne by K.B. Wagers, part of the Indranin series. Going into this, I was expecting an action-packed space opera with a lot of mercenary crews, space travel, adventuring, spaceship drama, that kind of thing. Yeah, this book didn't really have any of that. It was a political intrigue story set on another planet, so that's where the science fiction aspect comes in. The main character is essentially a gun runner, as they call it in this world. Not really a pirate per se, but, they're okay with bending the law. She's actually part of a royal house on Indranin, hence the title, and she's drawn back home when things start to get a little crazy, essentially. I tend to enjoy political intrigue in books as much as I enjoy space opera, so the switch wasn't necessarily a bad thing. One thing I really liked about the book is that it handled some familiar tropes in a really solid way. There were a couple of moments where I thought, I've seen this before, and it's kind of a snooze fest when you think you know what's coming next. Not the case here. Even from the very beginning, there were some indications. I'm like, oh man, she handled them really well. If you're going to do a trope, which most stories have them, then do it well. Put your own spin on it. Make it interesting. And I really like that a couple of the plot points early on didn't go the direction I thought they would. That being said, for a political intrigue heavy focused story, the plot was a little simple. It wasn't this masterfully woven political intrigue story. It was pretty basic and straightforward. Still enjoyable to read, but probably the difference between me absolutely raving about having read this book and just telling you that I enjoyed my time with it. I will probably continue the next one, but it wasn't anything to write home about. Another thing it struggled with was that the book was not very well paced. Very slow on occasions. It took forever to get from point A to point B. And while it was interesting and fun, and I think that gave a lot of time to develop character and relationships, which I think will be very important for the entire arc of the trilogy. It set an amazing foundation. It did take its sweet time getting there. So for a read that should have been kind of a quick breeze and felt kind of fast-paced, it drug. It was an interesting drag, but nonetheless. And finally, for a science fiction book, it really didn't have that many world-building components. Well, maybe that's not totally fair. It did have some cultural infusion in it, particularly with Indian culture. And the author did a somewhat interesting thing with a matriarchal society, but none of it was really rich or explored, It was just kind of there. But see, that's the thing. For the most part, it felt like it could have taken place on Earth, just, a couple hundred years in the future. Even the technology was just kind of throwaway. And gosh, it seems like I'm bashing on this book a lot, because when I sit down and analyze it, it had a lot more things against it than for it, but overall, I really enjoyed my time with it. This was a very good snack read, and I'm landing at 3.5 out of 5 stars, which is pretty decent, and I'm fully intending on continuing the next one. Let's talk about some other books you might like. The most prominent comparison that came to mind right away was the Sun Eater series by Christopher Rocchio. Specifically, the political aspects of that story and the relationships between the royal house. Now that one expands well beyond its borders and has amazing world building, amazing conflict, amazing villains, all the things. But if you want an entire book about just the interhouse politics, Behind the Throne will give you that one note of satisfaction. Fortune's Pawn by Rachel Aaron. If you liked Behind the Throne but wanted more of the gunrunner stuff, space exploration, alien creation, all of those things, but with a similar feeling main character, this is your pick. Rachel Bach is also known as Rachel Aaron, who wrote Heartstrikers and Eli Mon Press and is known for a lot of really amazing things. I love this author, and this is one of the funnest little science fiction trilogies I've ever read. And finally, because Behind the Throne was a political intrigue story with very little going on around it except for this fixation on a mystery and whodunit, a lot of people love Memory Called Empire. I can appreciate Memory Called Empire, but a lot of the things that it was missing were also missing from Behind the Throne, so maybe you'll like Behind the Throne even better than I do. This is the point in the project where I would be picking a random draw from the bucket, but I've decided that random draw I was doing way too many of them for my sanity per month. I am picking my next title from my long lineup of books on this TBR. If you're interested on what that is, I'll link the very first episode. But yes, after careful consideration, I have chosen as my next pick Demon in White by Christopher Ruocchio. I read the second book back in February and have been itching so hard to get back to this series, and I'm going to do it. Even though it's going to take me forever and might throw me behind schedule on this entire challenge, I don't care. But books this long that are really good tend to fly by anyway, so maybe it won't take me as long as I think it will. And then after this, we will go back to random draw. I don't need to say much about this really. If you watch any booktube at all, you have been beat over the head with how amazing this series is. And just know I'm of the same camp. I really enjoy it. It's one of the coolest things I've read in a long time, and I'd love to see what the author's going with this, because book 2 was so unconventional, but it kind of knocked my socks off, and the author has dazzled me in both of the first books with certain things that he's done, and so just, yeah, can't wait to see what experience gives him, because, yeah, thinking this will be amazing. So thank you for joining me on this series. If you missed the update, my patrons vote on what is the focus for each quarter, and they have decided to extend this deep dive challenge to the next quarter, so we'll be doing it for a total of 6 months instead of 3, so I get to read 12 books. Now, I gave them the option to change genres, and a couple of them might. I am sticking with science fiction, and in fact, I might tweak it a little bit, so instead of like this broad category of science fiction, I might narrow in and just focus on the books that will continue series, like a true deep dive into these series that I have open, and maybe in some cases, like wrapping them up and finishing them. So I might go through my little bucket and pull out everything that would be the start to a new series and just keep the ones that I already have going, because Lord knows there are plenty of those. My patrons get access to this video series and participate in the challenge a full quarter ahead of time when it goes live on the main. So link to my Patreon is in the description if you're interested. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye.